Herken huffed in annoyance. Their charge was a representative from the Gurish hegemony, known for his, to borrow the human term, tendency to be Scrooges on everything. He sought out the cheapest, fastest ships that were remotely reputable for transport, forging buying their own, despite having the money for it, simply saying that they didn't want to pay for the crew. Their own ship would have been better given the current situation, hunkered down, cloaked, as their daughter hissed expletives at their sire for their stupidity, as they avoided prowling mercenaries. Near the docks sat a human, clothed in a heavy, old, well-loved and maintained pressure suit, his helmet retracted, revealing his younger age. Fral, the suit looked older than him. "Herken and company?" the human said quietly, noting how the three had sidled up, avoiding as many looks as they could. "I am, and this is Lord Brisbane. Word travels fast," the young human said with a grin, tilting his head. "Inside, we'll talk more there," he said, jerking his head as he went back to how he had been, tipping back a creamy brew, the scent of caffeine making Herken's body twitch, wanting some of that heady, wonderful brew, but decided it would be best to drink later. The three clambered aboard, and learned quickly why the trip was so cheap. The ship was small, little more than a cockpit, kitchenette / all-in-one room, and a separated engineering bay. Brisbane's daughter huffed as she yanked her hood down, revealing her helmeted, almost alligator-like head, her central eye still glaring at her sire, as her helmet retracted into the back of her suit. "Cramped, but comfortable," she sighed, the lid to her voice tired, as she poked at one of the guest beds already secured to the floor, including crash webbing. There were two bolted down, and a chair attached to a comms console near the kitchenette with crash webbing, which struck Herken as odd. Why did every chair / bed have crash webbing? "Sorry for the lack of seating. I'm a data runner, don't normally run passengers," the young captain said, popping up behind them, the sound of a ceiling airlock heard through the small vessel. "Welcome aboard. Now, destination is the Flower of Light, you said?" He said, arms folded, staring at them as they heard the coffee maker kicking in, a carafe filling with the dark, soul-saving liquid, making Herken twitch again. The human spotted the twitch and set down 3 metallic mugs, after removing them from a madlocking cabinet, letting them get the bitter brew, even as Brisbane nodded. "You presume correctly, Captain. Swift as possible if you could," he rumbled before grimacing, setting several rectangular credit chips on the table, "with a little extra if you can manage it before she leaves system." Herken stifled a smile as he slowly tipped back his mug. Hopefully, young Dorea's lessons on generosity helped. "I'll see what I can do. She's a capital class, but the Saturn's got her own tricks. Best finish those quickly, or put a lid on them and lock them down," the captain said, an amused glint flashing in his eye, as he motioned to the crash webbing. "Herken, mind joining me in the cockpit? Chances are the light is going to need clearance codes, and I would rather not ruin the RCS clusters," he said, muttering again under his breath. With a sigh, Herken nodded, tipping back the hot brew, letting it warm his lethargic, aging body, before clambering into the co-pilot chair next to the pilot's chair, gaze dancing around the cockpit. It was small, but relatively roomy, likely due to the captain's bulky suit. And speaking of whom, the captain clambered into the pilot's seat, cheeks full of what was likely the remainder of a nutrition bar, before he swallowed thickly. "Sorry, wasn't expecting to get a job this quickly," he apologized, getting a snort out of Herken, reminded of his old squad mates trying to finish their meal when an alarm had gone off. Shaking himself from his musings, he watched as the human rapidly began pre-flight checks while calling the traffic control tower. Breaker, this is Saturn V to control. IFF code Sierra Oscar November 1 Charlie. Prepping for launch. Flight computer transmitting path now," he said, listening to the returning chatter as the flight computer glowed and the ship rumbled like a beast waking from its sleep, oddly loud for such a small vessel. Saturn V, this is Control. That's a negative on that launch. The comms crackled, making the human frown at the Vox unit. Scanner showing we have a hyena vessel sitting right outside the launch bay, weapons hot. Unless you've got a good-sized gun on that rowboat, we can't allow you takeoff. Herkon cursed softly, setting back, even as the human fiddled with something. Control, this is Saturn, sending amended flight plan. Amended takeoff routine and engine design now, requesting permission to buzz tower and habitat section, he said, even as he began to open red hatches on his console and began flipping them up. Every switch he flipped, the rumbling got louder and louder. Saturn V, this is Control. Permission granted. Arranging launch bay for hot launch. Cameras prepped and rolling. The comm crackled, getting Herkon's attention. A drop of dread filling his upper stomach. What did? Roger that one, Control. Pity we can't see their faces. Keep comms open on wide, we should at least hear them, the captain replied with a grin, even as he reached for other systems, slowly pushing a set of levers up to the top, and then flicked off the shields, before reaching for a long lever next to his seat that was set in the up position, not unlike an old ground-bound automobile handbrake. The shield was very, very telling. First, it meant either A, they were screwed and they picked a ship about to turn them in, unlikely given the conversation, the other. Herkon quickly grabbed the crash webbing, slamming it down over himself in a panic. My lord, madame, I would advise you to secure yourselves, quickly, he barked out, his main eyes focused ahead, his third eye focused on the pilot with dread and anticipation. The human grinned as he heard the confused, guttural language from behind them. Launch in 3? Came the countdown from Control, as the doors before them opened up. All but the last one, the sound of scaffolding releasing the vessel in zero gravity, then the faint hums of pumps removing air. 2? Armor paneling moved up behind them, visible on the rear-view cameras, scorched and well used, other arms locking it in place, even as the ship seemed to rumble louder with each passing moment. Steady, girl, steady, the human muttered under his breath, hand tightening on the lever, thumb pressing down on the button at the tip. 1, launch, the STC controller said, as the outer doors opened up like an iris, and the captain slammed the lever down and the ship roared. Herkon was thrown back into his chair as the engine snarled to life, barely making out startled yelps and cursing behind them. The engine audible thanks to the engine room, as it propelled the small ship forward like a missile, atomic fire actually licking up past the cockpit for a moment, before they cleared the station at a blistering speed, zipping past the large cruiser sitting outside. He was thrown again as the human yanked the lever up, shutting the engine off, and then yanked the control yoke sideways, the ship snarling as her RCS clusters burned, spinning the ship 180 degrees, turning to face the startled Null vessel, several fighters spinning around to see what was launched. Herkon cursed loudly as he was thrown back again, slammed into the chair, saved only by his helmet and the wonderful cushion on the chair, as the human slammed the ignition lever down again, even as the vessel howled again. The engine once more shook the ship like a Scraven trap, slowing them down and then racing forward again, zipping between fighters, skimming past the surface of the Null cruiser, and then rocketed past Control's viewpoint, even as vicious curses were spat out over the Vox at their speed. What the feck? Came the controller's voice, as the little vessel sped along the station, towards the slowly rotating habitat ring. Come on, little faster, girl. I know you got it in you, the human mumbled, even as he pushed the acceleration levers as far as they would go up, the ship snarling as they got closer and closer. Red lights zipped past on either side, as the Knolls tried to shoot at them with fighters, splashing off the station shields just past them. Fighters trying to close the distance, but only fell farther and farther behind, just as they zipped between the support beams of the habitat ring, now facing the black void of space, with no targets other than them. Saturn V to Control, clearing station. Attempting to get to safe distance to engage skipper drive, the human grunted out, pressed against his seat, not shutting the engine off. Herkon understood why, unfortunately, but still itched to turn on the shields back up, feeling naked with only the deflectors on, keeping micrometeors from turning them to a hole-filled slag pile, but knew he couldn't. They were literally going too fast for a shield generator that would fit the ship size to keep up. They would outfly their own shields. "Saturn 5, you're clear to jump when ready. Thanks for one hell of a show," came the STC controller, mild whooping heard in the background. "Just a heads up, that null ship's trying to give chase." "They can try. Commencing skip in 3, 2, 1, the human said, and slammed the lever back up, the main engine shutting off, and slamming a hand on a button in the center of his console. White filled their vision, accompanied by the low purring of something other. Aboard the Flower of Light, the command crew were focused on their tasks, listening out for any ships dropping in. The captain standing at a viewport, nervously flicking their tail. "Captain! Skip signature detect! Sweet Krell!" the sensors officer shrieked. A distant flash of light seen through the viewport. "They popped out at 2,300 kilometers a second. Are they... Additional contacts. Light null cruiser, right on top of them," the officer said, as the flower slowly turned to face the light. "On screen, sensors. Weapons on standby. Target lock on the nulls," the Girish said, grimly, as an image flicked onto the screen, revealing what amounted to a small habitat module and cockpit, bolted onto an engine twice the size of a habitable section, shaped like an old Convair-class shuttle, but hadn't ditched her lower stage. Her main engine bathed whatever was behind her in nuclear fire, a wide plume of her propulsion exhaust pushing her forward at a startling rate, racing towards the flower like her life depended on it. 2,500? 3,000. And still climbing, came the shaken whisper, as the ship didn't attempt to slow down. "Sir, Vox channel open with the ship. Code confirmed. Lord Brisbane is aboard," the Vox officer yelled, as the tiny human vessel kept accelerating, and then shut its engines off, her RCS engines glowing brightly, spinning 180, her single massive engine aimed at them before it ignited. She was slowing down, adjusting her vector to align with a hangar. "All cannons! Knock those nulls into the void! I want medical down to the hangar, now!" the flower's captain roared, one claw pointed at the null vessels, even as the more engine than ship vessel slowed down next to them, now out of the captain's sight. Though now he had more pressing issues, as the vessel rocked, her main batteries opening up with a vicious salvo, rocking the null cruiser, making it bring its attention up to the much larger capital ship. Herken groaned as he felt the ship, comparatively gently strafe sideways, filling as she shuddered. Long, underused landing gear extending out and a soft shake as she landed, purring like an overgrown feline who had gotten a forbidden treat. "That was an experience," he said, trying desperately not to be too ill, even as the human laughed. "Not the craziest stunt I pulled, just glad we landed in one piece. Last time I burnt out every RCS cluster I had trying to outmaneuver a rogue nanite assembly," the young captain said, grinning a little, even as he clambered out. "Was hell of a lot of fun, though," he said, as Herken slowly pulled himself out of the crash webbing. In the back, the Lord was stuck to the bed in crash webbing, his helmet up, the visor completely covered in sick. "I'm never flying on a human vessel again," his daughter groaned, head resting on the console before her, stuck in the chair's crash webbing. Coffee splattered all over her general vicinity, an empty, uncovered mug next to her. The hatch opened, and Herken smiled as the medic sprinted in, collecting up the Lord and his daughter, who got up shakily. Later, as he and the human rode the elevator, headed to the bridge, he looked down, through the window, to see the Saturn. He balked, seeing at last what they had been flying on. "What? I thought you knew she was an old Convair," the human said, seeing what his reaction was, grinning a little. "Nothing faster than the old gal for her class," he said, with a lopsided grin. He stared at the human, and then sighed. Staring at the innocently sitting vessel, till the elevator finally passed through the ceiling, headed to the bridge.